Hello.
Hey.
Hi. It is the 9th of May, and it is day 50.
Oh.
50.
Feels big, doesn't it?
Feels like a landmark, and in other ways it feels like we're right back at the beginning, all over again. Because, we've had a couple of days of, not being... Well, we had a couple of days of being very angry. And yesterday, we sort of lightened up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm angry again. I'm really angry again. Mainly because after all of yesterday's sort of VE Day celebrations, which, actually to begin with, I was sort of living and let live with that, because what we were seeing in our street were people socially distancing and sort of sitting outside, and it seemed all fairly harmless. But then today, quite a lot of stories have come up in my Facebook newsfeed that suggest that last night in A&E was fucking carnage. So that's coming from several different sources, but all of whom are people who work in A&E or people who are paramedics or whatever. But basically they described it as being like a typical New Year's Eve. Like, it had a very big sort of party atmosphere. There were lots of sort of drunken injuries and assaults and head scans from head bumps and things, but that's the people who've ended up in hospital. But obviously that in itself is bad. That's a bunch of people that are probably going to get infected because they've had to go to hospital. But also it's a symptom of what sort of nonsense people are getting up to. If everybody was having that big a sort of drunken party enough to have fights with neighbours and things, then that obviously means social distancing measures have not been observed. And I get it, because you know what happens, like, people have a drink and to begin with they're being very careful about it, but you have a few more drinks and then you sort of forget a little bit, or just go, or tap people on the shoulder and sort of forget that, I'm not really supposed to be doing that. If you're all gathering together, don't put yourself in the position where you're going to be tempted to do that, because turns out everybody's acted like, well, not everybody, lots of people have acted like twats. And I don't say this lightly. That tips me over the edge from thinking, maybe if we're not careful, we might be heading towards a second peak, to me feeling like it's fucking inevitable now.
It's definitely going to come, and it's really kind of irresponsible the way people and it's not just reports and things that we've read about A&E and stuff like that. Ellie didn't go out yesterday, but I did go out to walk the dog, daily exercise and all that, and I get the dog her exercise as well. And I saw firsthand, just a gaggle of people in the street, drinking, interacting, breaking social distancing, which already, even if people are sitting in their gardens, to be honest, like, people think, 2 meters is fine. But it isn't fine, really. That's just what they've imposed because that's manageable.
Yeah.
But actually, you can still spread things, like a cough or a sneeze can spread things up to 10 meters, germs and things. So even 2 meters is kind of not quote-unquote safe, but to be interacting and mingling is even worse.
I read a thing that actually makes a lot of sense as well, because it's sort of saying, like, 2 meters is fine for sort of in passing, but 2 meters if you're going to stand in the same place and sort of sit and chat to each other doesn't really spike. The longer you spend in the same place, the more sort of particles and droplets you've got in the air around you, and actually it ends up being that you've kind of filled your little local area. So actually, if either of you are infected, then even staying at too distant, particularly if there's no breeze or you're indoors or something. So outdoors better, but still it's not great. But that's the only sort of enforceable thing, like 2 meters in shops and things. But actually, if you're all sitting around in your garden, but I know, like, it's all anecdotal really, because it's like screenshots and things that have been shared around on Facebook. But I know people who are like, my next door neighbours have got friends around in the garden, and they're all having a barbecue. And I know lots of people who are saying that. And I think it is, basically, there's a few different things that's caused it, but the main one is some very irresponsible journalism and a very, I have to assume, deliberate leak from Downing Street to the papers, very strategically timed to come before VE Day and before the bank holiday weekend, but also that they can essentially retract on Sunday night when Boris talks to the nation. So you would think, having seen the newspapers, if this was genuinely, oh my God, we're not going to talk about releasing lockdown, we better do damage control. Very feeble, weak, vague messaging coming from Downing Street yet again. In the daily press briefings, just lots of, I don't want to prejudge what Boris is going to say, but don't expect any big changes, but not saying, oh, absolutely don't, stay in your fucking home. Well, obviously, I'd be quite impressed if they got Dominic Raab going, stay in your fucking homes. But I would welcome that.
Yeah.
Actually, I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit of panic in their eyes right about now, because when we went into lockdown, the number of people that had cases, active cases, and how quickly those were spreading, we were in the single digits, and very quickly that escalated to triple figures, and we were in the exponential growth phase for quite a long while before it started to taper off. But that was from a starting point of not many active cases. We've got thousands upon thousands of active cases going on already. The only thing that's keeping that spread down is the lockdown now. So if you ease those lockdown measures, or as we have seen, if you ignore those social distancing measures, 2 weeks from now, we're going to be back in exponential growth. But it's going to be from a starting point of thousands. So if those thousands of people are infecting thousands of people, it's going to explode, and it's going to be much, much bigger numbers than it was in the first peak, which was already horrific. For several days in a row, we were losing almost 1,000 people a day. And we're going to go back there, and it's going to be higher numbers, and it's going to be because of mixed, feeble, vague messages coming out of Downing Street, and I can't help but look at it as herd immunity just being done by the back door.
Well, my friend Phil was making a very good point, because he was saying that, you know, people are using VE Day as an excuse basically to have these kind of street parties, and we were kind of saying yesterday, like, there's a lot of people who've never done anything for VE before suddenly going, oh well, we must have a street party.
It was an important landmark, I guess, because 75 years, but yeah.
But even
we're
so,
not expecting. That's
like,
not what this was an excuse for a jolly.
Exactly, and people are using it as a kind of excuse. And my friend Phil was making the point that we're supposed to be paying tribute to and respecting and celebrating people who made great sacrifices for us during World War II, and it's not just the soldiers and things, but also the members of the public who are kind of living in fear during air raids, having to go into air raid shelters,
having to do all of the blackout stuff, and
deal with
the night watches and rationing and all of that,
and make all sorts of sacrifices. And obviously, it's brilliant that subsequent to that, we've never had to live through a world war. But this lockdown is a chance for our generation to kind of
do our bit to protect the elderly, who are the people who went through that.
Exactly, and instead of that, we're kind of disrespecting them and kind of not doing ourselves proud at all. You know, do you want to look back years from now and go, oh well, we went out on the piss and then ended up having to go to A&E, and then there was a second wave. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's not the story you want to tell your
No,
grandkids.
It's really, really not. And also, and I think it's important to note, as well, as if this was genuinely all about respecting the older generation and looking after them and sort of treating them with the honour they deserve, then it's a very unfortunate truth that we ejected many, many, many elderly patients from hospital in preparation for the influx of patients for corona into care homes untested, who then had corona and spread it through care homes which are solely inhabited by vulnerable people. We've had huge numbers of deaths in care homes. Single care homes have lost double digits of patients because they're old, they're vulnerable, and they were in hospital. They were ejected from hospital without checking whether or not they had corona. They did, and then staff of those care homes and patients, well, in like their residents, not patients, in a care home, have died. How's that for respecting our generation who looked after us throughout the wartime?
And what we're doing, what's happening is they're being allowed to die while people pay tribute to them by having a beer in their front garden and breaking social distancing.
Breaking social distancing rules, ending up in a fight with their neighbours. There were loads of people in A&E from drunken scuffles and drunken mishaps.
Fucking hollow, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's bullshit. Don't pretend this is about respecting the previous generation. This is about you being bored in lockdown and you're fed up of it and you feel like it's all being eased soon, so might as well have a big, like, end of lockdown party, except it's not the end of lockdown.
Also, worth bearing in mind, like...
I'm getting very cross.
I know, but it's worth bearing in mind. You're right to be cross, to be honest. It's worth bearing in mind that there might be some very minor kind of loosening of restrictions announced on Sunday. It looks like that's going to be happening. It's not going to be everyone back to work in the pub. That's not how it's going to go. It's going to be very slow. It's going to be very minor. But even if they did say, hey, we're lifting lockdown and you can all go out and behave as you like, that doesn't mean that everything's going to be safe and we've beaten the virus and everything's fine now, right?
No.
You still would be best advised to just show a bit of caution. You know, like if they say you can leave the house and you immediately go around hugging all your neighbours and, you know, going and getting drunk and going out on the pool and just interacting with everyone. I mean, it's in the same way as if they suddenly tried to legalise guns, you wouldn't go, oh, brilliant, well, now I can shoot myself in the face, right? That's not... It's still dangerous. You still got to use your common sense, you know? And I was trying to make some of these points about how irresponsible people were being and about some of this stuff on Facebook. And someone commented on my post kind of saying, well, I broadly agree with what you're saying, but I'm not going to share this because I worry this is going to be the new narrative now, that the government has made all these mistakes, but they're going to kind of get away with it because
the people are being criticised for making
and people
poor
are going
choices.
to blame each other rather than kind of... And I get his point, but at the same time, I do think, like, the government have made terrible mistakes and immoral choices. The press have been massively irresponsible, and a load of members of the public have... Not everyone, obviously, like, loads of people have been great, but loads of members of the public have behaved really stupidly.
Yeah.
All of those things can be true, and none of those things... No one thing of those three lets the others off the hook in any way.
Absolutely not. It's not like if the government made all those mistakes, but the press were being very responsible and not reporting on it, people still would be looking to the government for guidance, and they still would be following that guidance. People would still be being affected because of the fact that people haven't been screened at the borders. They've just announced that, well, one of the measures that's probably going to come in is that they're going to start testing people and asking for a mandatory quarantine for 14 days if you're arriving in the country. A bit fucking late for that, isn't it? We are one of only 2 countries in the world that doesn't have any checks at airports. Even the Americans are checking people at airports, and they are doing this even worse than we are. By a long way, actually, but with Donald Trump at the helm, what would you expect?
And also, their deaths are much more than ours, but they are a massive country.
Yeah.
I mean, the size of the UK and our population, it's staggering that we're kind of second in the world. Like,
oh yeah,
it's not
by many, like, because you can measure it in different ways. Because some people are going, oh well, you've got to do it by population density, and then we're not the second in the world. But like, for like how many people per million are getting the virus? But basically, thousands of people have died here. And it's many tens of thousands of people have died in America. It's too many people have died, and ultimately, however, this whole, like, you can't compare other countries and the stats will all bear out over time. Yes, they will. Years from now, studies will go into it and they will be able to really carefully analyse which countries did best and which countries did worst. You can't use that as an excuse to let us off the hook, because ultimately, by any standard that you're measuring our success in this, we have not been a success. Thousands of people have died. And if you look at other countries with similar populations, similar population densities, not exactly comparable, but similar, they've managed to keep the deaths down below 1,000. We've got well over 30,000, and that's only in the official figures. And on that front, I want to sort of kick off again, because they do appear, and I've really tried to do my research into it, but unfortunately, like, that you can't easily look up just the data. You seem to only be able to find where the data is being reported. So I'm cross-referencing the number that is being announced. And repeatedly, I keep finding that the daily number that is being given in the press briefing by the government, that's showing up in other sources as only in the same number, exactly the same number, as the figure for England and Wales, which suggests that repeatedly and continuously they are not including the Northern Irish and Scottish figures in the death toll, but getting away with saying the UK because it's government, and they forget that England and Wales... Well, they forget that the UK isn't England, I think.
It's either that or it's being massively kind of misreported.
They're massaging the numbers to make it sound as well as they possibly can. But how they've got the gall to say these are the UK figures when they're not...
It would be great to get some clarification on this, because if they're doing that, then the press should be calling them out on it.
Well, you were sort of saying quite interestingly about the press. It's not in the press's interest, really, for lockdown to continue, because people aren't buying their newspapers. They're just reading stuff online.
I've actually done a bit of research on this. I'm going to go into a bit more detail, I've actually done an unusual amount of research into this for me. So
good, gives me drinking time.
Yeah, you'll excuse me if I look at my notes as I talk about this a bit, because I'm not good on keeping figures in my head. But basically, like, yeah, during lockdown, the press have been, just losing money hand over, and already, like last year, the Sun. Just to go with the one example of the Sun newspaper. Last year they reported a loss, or like at the start of this year, sorry, in February they reported a loss for the previous year of £68 million, and a lot of that was to do with legal fees and and damages they had to pay out because of the phone hacking scandal.
Couldn't happen to a nicer company.
But also a lot of that was down to just a loss in circulation.
Yeah.
Obviously newspapers don't make their money from the actual
sales
of the paper, but from the advertising they sell. But obviously the more papers they sell, the more people are willing to pay more money for that advertising. Yeah. So the circulation is very important to them, and that's dwindling anyway before all this. It actually would have been worse last year, but the Sun had a bit of a windfall of money. Do you want to know why?
Why?
Because they went into business with a Australian bookmaker called Tabcorp. To create Sun bets,
right?
Because this Australian company thought, well, the Sun's got a big readership. It'd be great to kind of get that audience and people can make bets.
Okay.
The whole thing was a disaster.
Right.
The Sun bets is most famous / notorious for a situation where they had to pay. They were fined by gambling regulators because they tried to fix a bet by paying a non-league footballer to eat a pie on television.
What?
Yeah.
What were people betting on?
Whether or not someone will eat a pie. I don't know I meant to do more research into that bit and I forgot. But
I don't understand.
But I remember it was on all like the news quiz and things at the time as well. It was so it was a bit of a betting scandal.
Better off for this.
So what happened was the whole thing, Sunbets, has proven to be such a disaster.
Yeah.
That Tabcorp paid the Sun $38 million to get out of the deal early. So
they made 68 million losses despite being paid 32 million for someone not to work with them anymore.
Yeah. 38 million. So they basically failed into a massive windfall. Imagine being, I could be so shit.
Oh, look, God, pay me to be shit at
exactly,
things.
I can be shit at stuff. Give me 38 million. It's just really...
good.
So
people
anyway,
don't pay me to come to escape rooms that are shit. I have to be good at my job for people to pay me money.
Exactly.
Jesus Christ.
So despite getting a £38 million windfall, there was still over 60 million losses announced for the year.
Wow.
So that would have been basically about 100 million they would have been down.
Yeah.
That's last year anyway, before any of this coronavirus stuff. Now, with coronavirus, people aren't getting out to the houses... of their houses, they're not getting to the supermarket or the shop where they'd be buying the paper. Certainly, transport hubs like service stations and stuff, and petrol stations, way down in terms of newspaper sales, where people would often be buying them, or train stations, places like that. Anyway, well, you know where you can buy a newspaper.
Most of those places aren't.
You know that recently you haven't been.
Yeah.
That's all you need to know. But. And in them, I couldn't find any more recent statistics, but over the month of March, according to a report in the Financial Times, sales of all newspapers were down by over a fifth.
Okay.
Right, so if you're already...
I'm surprised it's only a fifth, actually. I would thought it'd be lower. I guess maybe people are a bit hungrier for news, though, so people who maybe don't normally buy a newspaper might, on their trip to the shops, be picking one up, so maybe that's, like, counteracting slightly, that people who go out every day...
Possibly.
Or have maybe... I don't know, are they still running, like... Because I know delivery and post is still going on. Are paper deliveries still going on?
I think subscriptions, I think you can still get them delivered, but...
Well, no, but with subscriptions to most newspapers, actually, they give you a voucher and you pick it up at a shop. Like, deliveries are usually run by news agents.
There are websites where you can get them home delivered, and that is part of the way that was already in place to counteract things before all this happened.
Right.
So, as I was saying, though, so they're down by over a fifth, and so... Obviously, if you're already struggling and your subscriptions are dwindling and your sales are dwindling, you don't want to lose over a fifth of your sales. That's not ideal. And we know that the Sun are worried because their editor has been tweeting, asking people to kind of support the paper and go out and support press and print media by going and buying the paper. Now, that's fair enough. There's a lot of companies, a lot of people asking for support right now for things.
You can hustle for your money. That's fine.
But it is an indication that they are worried, and things are down.
I can also hustle people not to buy the Sun, though.
Yeah, of course. But the other thing is that it's not just about sales dropping now. It's the longer this goes on, the more likely it is that people just get into the habit of getting their news from other sources,
and they don't
getting
fall
more of
back
their news
into the habit
online,
of getting news.
and then when
later.
this comes up, they don't return. Why go back, right? So that, and again, that is a thing that is a worry in a lot of industries.
Yeah.
But
it's better for the environment if people aren't buying hard copy
It is better
papers.
for the environment, but so obviously the Sun is worried about all these things. They're not the only ones.
No,
but
it must be across the whole board.
But so,
and actually, even with the in London, the free papers, obviously they're mainly based around transport hubs. So even your Metro and Evening Standard and things like that.
And local papers are really suffering as well, and that's a bit more worrying because they actually are useful to the community in some ways.
Yeah.
But when the Sun run a headline like they did last Thursday, saying "Happy Monday," basically suggesting that pubs and cafes will be
on the front
their
of the
pub
Sun.
gardens on their front
it
page.
Said pubs and cafes to reopen outdoor areas. Now, even in this leaked document, it didn't say that was going to be happening on Monday. It said that was one of the steps of a 6-month plan anyway. So that's irresponsible journalism on top of an irresponsible breach, which had, I was reading something in The Guardian. It was an opinion piece. I can't remember the name of the journalist. But basically in that, it said, everybody knows this was a deliberate. They told the papers this. This wasn't a leak. They gave the papers this information, just proven by the fact that all of the papers had the information. That isn't a leak. I've said this before, but it's deliberate. And but then obviously newspapers like The Sun like to go for the most salacious possible interpretation. So pubs and cafes reopen. That's what our customers want to
But they're
hear.
not just being salacious. They're not just telling you what you want to hear, right? Because when The Sun, all these other papers run a headline on a front page like that with that sort of information on it, basically implying that it's fairly safe to go out and you'll be able to go back to pubs and cafes soon, and just making it sound a lot safer than it is, right? Are they just trying to get you to read their paper? Are they looking out for your best interests? Or are they trying to get people to break lockdown to go out and buy newspapers, or trying to force the government's hand to kind of push through lockdown easing measures so that more people go out and buy newspapers?
More popular with the public to release lockdown measures, so that there's pressure coming from all sides.
So it's just a question of going if the newspapers, if the print media start telling you you should be going out, don't listen, because they're just trying to get you to go out so you can buy their papers again. Don't buy The Sun.
We're going to a
anyway
scary space, and the reason I sort of said at the start of this that this feels like square one is because when this all started, I remember sort of how anxious I was and how news hungry I was, trying to find every possible story, which I think I've kept up to a certain degree, but with a bit more of a calmer head, and I've got a bit numb to it and a bit more used to it, but was feeling like, okay, we're over the worst, and as long as we just keep on this footing, eventually this is going to get to a reasonable level. But now I'm back to, this is just the beginning. It's about to get a lot worse, and it's going to be bigger than before. And I don't want to feel like I'm a fucking oracle here, because I'm not. I don't have any, I said this to my mum today, and she said, stop predicting things then if you keep being right. And I was just like,
that's great.
It's not my fault. I'm literally doing everything. I haven't left the fucking house.
Yeah, we're not jinxing stuff. It's
ages. The only place I have left the house in probably the last fortnight is to go to the vets, and I have done that. Face mask on, stop in the car park, ring the vets. They come and open the front door. They close the next door. You go put the cat in. You close the door, you leave. I have not crossed paths with any fucker. I've not done anything wrong. I'm doing everything possible that I could be doing. You're not breaking any rules either. Loads of people aren't. And I'm not accusing everybody of breaking the rules. I think most people are probably being quite sensible, with occasional slips here and there. We're all human. As long as you're trying your best, I can go with it. But don't put yourself in a position where you're going to be tempted to break lockdown, or don't, because also, by the way, everybody having these lovely little street party shindigs with their neighbours, they're not even the people that you'd be wanting to socialise with if we were under normal rules. So maybe don't have loads of drinks with your neighbours and then just end up like leaning on their wall and getting all up
that's
and like.
The thing, isn't it? There
if
are
I was
people...
going to break lockdown, it would be to like give my niece a hug or
there are people
like
who haven't
just
seen their family. A friend of ours today was saying that she hasn't hugged her boyfriend since March.
7 weeks. She said it's been since she's been.
Because they've been separated by lockdown.
She has health issues, and so she's not just sort of following the rules. She's fully shielding, so she's getting stuff delivered and things. She hasn't touched another human being in 7 weeks.
Well, meanwhile, other people
is gonna mess with your head, but she's doing the right thing, and that anyone in that position, I feel really bad for you. But you're doing the right thing and just keep going because it is the right thing to be doing. When you consider that some people are making that sacrifice...
And then other people are breaking social distancing to touch a neighbour that they wouldn't talk to the rest of the year. It's ludicrous. But we are running out of time and we have a couple of things that we still need to get through because even though we've been very critical of certain members of the public the last couple of days, there are still people doing good things and trying to help and trying to make a difference. For example, there's a guy online called Simon Harris, and he is doing a fundraiser. He's heard, obviously, that the newspaper circulation is down. Very worried about it. He's doing a fundraiser to save
I'm 100% behind this fundraiser.
And, he's trying to raise some money. He's seen that the print media... I mean, let's see it in his own words. You know, he says, "I will take every penny that is donated to this fundraising campaign, and every day I'll use it to buy copies of The Sun for my local store, and then deliver them absolutely free of charge to homes in my local area in South Essex. If other people follow my lead and set up their own fundraising campaigns, we could send their circulation through the roof in a matter of days." Now, obviously, he's just one man, right? He can't be expected to work miracles. There are a couple of caveats. So he says, during the lockdown, it's taking ages to get my kids to bed every night. I'm sure a lot of people are experiencing that. And he says, usually by the time they've settled down, my local Sainsbury's is closed. Now, if this happens on any particular day, I'll donate the money to local food banks instead. You know, he's tried. You know,
making an effort. Fair play.
And food bank seems like a reasonable thing to do with people's money.
Well, that might help the local area as well a bit, I guess. Yeah.
But he also says, I don't like rain, so if it is raining on any particular day, I will donate any money collected to local food banks instead. And again, that's very reasonable. Certainly on days when it's been raining, Lucy has gone on much shorter walks, hasn't she?
Yeah, that's fair. That's reasonable.
I also don't want to go out walking in the rain. He says, I don't like sun or wind either, so if it's sunny or windy on any particular day, I'll donate any money collected to local food banks instead. I'm not fond of clouds either. In fact, he says,
all seems quite reasonable to me.
In fact, he says, if you actually think I'm giving that shit rag a single penny of this instead of donating the money to local food banks, you're very much mistaken. And at the time of publishing, the Crowdfunder has raised over £17,000 for Essex Coronavirus Action Food Bank, and whether or not we don't know how many people are donating to that because they've read it all and they get it.
Yeah, both. I like if you've read the whole thing and you're donating to that because you know that essentially it's a fundraiser for food banks that is having a jab at the sun. Great. If you actually think you're saving the sun and you're donating to that because you don't read things closely enough, because you can't, because you're trying to save the sun, so you can't look closely at what you're reading ever. So yeah, I'm hoping that people have donated for those reasons too. Basically, I love this. I'll put a link to the crowdfunder and have at it.
We might have to put a link to the article as well, because we don't want people just reading the blurb and thinking that we're really putting our weight behind this. Weight, as if we have any clout, but you know what I mean. You don't want people to think we're endorsing the stuff, but anyway.
I'll just put crowdfunder link, and then people will have had to watch this to know what I'm talking about.
That would be great. But also,
you have to do Money in the Bank, because
I do have to do Money in the Bank
tonight when they watch this. Hey.
That is the sound effect for wrestling news, because I have got some wrestling news now.
Oh, sorry, I ruined that.
What it is,
I didn't know you were leading into it.
On Sunday is going to be another WWE pay-per-view event, but you don't have to buy the pay-per-view. You can just pay $9.99 a month for the WWE Network. You can get that for 1 month and cancel it, or if you've never had it before,
they do a month free.
You can get a month free. So if you subscribed for WrestleMania, you might still be covered. Or if you didn't subscribe for WrestleMania, you can subscribe to this. Now, when WrestleMania happened, I was encouraging everyone for days to kind of tune in and watch it, and I even made a video encouraging because I thought it was going to be a lot of fun. It was going to be weird, and it was fun, wasn't it?
It was. It was. I did enjoy it. I will watch other WrestleManias.
And
the Firefly Funhouse bit was the standout.
Yeah,
bit.
that was genuinely incredible. But this time around, I do think that Money in the Bank will be fun, but I'm kind of much more ambivalent about recommending it because I think WWE and their main competition AEW have both behaved quite badly.
How so?
Just very irresponsible
in
in
1
terms
minute
of
or less.
still running shows during lockdown, having people on TV, not
Yeah, they
social
managed to
distancing,
wrangle a deal
which is
to get themselves declared essential workers, didn't they?
yes, which is not cool. AEW had a guy called Jake the Snake Roberts, who is a guy who's been working in wrestling since like the 70s, and is an absolute legend of the game, but he's old, he is not in the best of health, he's had all sorts of drug and drink problems in the past that have kind of ravaged his body in various ways, and like he's doing well considering, but he should not be appearing on live television and mingling with all sorts of people, and and they were claiming they tested everyone beforehand, but those tests aren't 100% accurate, and also people have to travel to and from, like it's just not safe, and they a lot of kind of, they're claiming they're keeping social distancing, but then you just see shots of people like huddled together cheering on the matches, like they've got other wrestlers and staff kind of cheering rather than letting fans in, but still it's like
it's a bunch of people all getting together.
And also WWE have sacked a whole bunch of people at this time. They've held on to a load of people for years because they didn't want them going off and working for competition, so they were kind of hoarding all this talent, and now there's nowhere for them to go. They've sacked them and kind of cut their incomes.
Super quickly, what actually is Money in the Bank? So,
Money in the Bank, as I say, I'm ambivalent about recommending it, but on the other hand, if you are into wrestling, by the time you watch this on Sunday, it's happening tonight. It will start about midnight on Sunday, going to the early hours of Monday morning. It will be available to watch on Catch Up on the WWE Network. Money in the Bank is a thing they have every year where they have a ladder match, and you have about 8 guys or girls in it, and they have to climb the ladder, and at the top will be a briefcase with a contract in it for a championship opportunity. So if you win the match, you climb the ladder, you grab the briefcase, that's how you win, and what it means is you've got that for a year, then you can cash that in for a championship opportunity
at any point that you want.
Any point that you want in the year, and you can even do that after the champion has just had a match,
right,
and is tired and exhausted and in a bad way. You can spring on people.
But you get to just have the match when you say you want the match, like now.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So someone could be like beaten up and bruised and tired from the match they've just had.
Right.
And you can run down and go, up, right, I want my match, and you're all fresh, and you just beat them up and take the thing. So
seems a little sneaky.
It is a bit sneaky, but it can lead to some fun sort of storytelling opportunities in the world of wrestling. And
we gotta call it a day.
That means, though, is the reason this. I know I will wrap this up really tightly, because what that means this year, though, because of all social distancing, they're trying to do it in a slightly different way. They're going to run the men's and women's ladder matches at the same time. They're going to run them throughout the evening of the kind of pay-per-view event.
Right.
Interspersed between other matches.
Right.
And I think it's going to be like a cinematic kind of match rather than live. So it's going to be kind of like basically the best matches at this year's WrestleMania. Right. And they're going to be, the ladder will be on the roof of the WWE's Titan Towers head offices, 7 stories up. Ugh. And they have to start on
I'm not going to be able to watch this.
They have to start on the ground floor.
Oh, they've got to get all the way up the building?
Yeah, they've got to fight their way up the building. I
enjoy that.
I presume the elevators will be off limits.
Yeah, that's really boring. But although 2 people wrestling in a lift for 7 stories would be quite fun.
That could be
quite tight space.
And yeah, so that's. I think it's genuinely going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to try and make you watch it.
I will watch it.
But like I say, I'm a bit ambivalent about recommending it, really. But if you are interested in that sort of thing, that'll be happening at midnight tonight.
Longest ever video. We gotta call it a day.
But I had to kind of get that in. And I've been meaning to mention it for days.
Yeah. And I keep just getting angry and shouting about stuff.
All political. So anyway.
I know. Right. Okay. Well, we gotta call it a day there. But yeah, happy 50th, guys.
Yeah. Oh.